Hello, friends! As I yell while my girlfriend is asleep in the room next door. Welcome to No Cap Room. My name is Jake Fisher. I am the senior NBA reporter at Yahoo Sports, and I'm joined, as always, by my man, your man, everyone's man, live from South Beach, senior NBA writer from Yahoo Sports, Dan Devine. What is up?
Mere hours ago, Jake, all of these seats were covered by towels that said culture. And then the Denver Nuggets took all those towels and jammed them up into one giant ball and shoved it right down the throat of the Miami Heat. Had a big bounce back game 3. And honestly, Jake, it's pretty important to me that you dressed up for this. Thank you so much for showing me the respect and our listeners and our viewers the respect of dressing up for tonight's show.
For our YouTube watchers and for those listening on your audio platform of choice, I am doing my best Monty McCutcheon. I've got my burgundy
I think you can
suit.
hear your bow tie. I think your bow tie is actually audio quality.
It's there. It's a little floral pattern. We got a blue shirt, burgundy blazer. Dan's looking like a snack as always over there when he's got his hair cut and a suited. But he continues to be at every finals game, much to the chagrin of his wife and children, I'm sure. So while you're there, we shouldn't waste too much of your time with compliments about our attire. We should get you recording. We should get you back to the hotel and writing and keep you fresh so you can call the loved ones bright and early. That's my goal here. So we are coming to you live. Not live. We are recording this live. You and I are talking in, our mouths are moving. We are dialed in, but people are not listening to this live. 12:23 Eastern on the clock after the Nuggets defeated Miami 109-94 to reclaim a 2-1 series lead in the 2023 NBA Finals, stealing back home court advantage after Miami took it from the Nuggets' clutches at Ball Arena on Sunday. It kind of felt a little bit like a replay of Game 1, except this was far more of like a stomp out fourth quarter from Denver. Duncan Robinson hit a couple threes late that made Michael Malone call a timeout and shake his head after the Nuggets' fourth quarter woes, even though they obviously won Game 1. Was kind of a huge talking point entering this game. And Denver kind of held them off, a 15-point advantage. That's kind of where this thing felt. I mean, the first half was very knotted back and forth, really a fun opening half. But then in the third, things kind of blew open, and they brought a 14-point advantage into the fourth and never really looked back. Dan, first general thoughts, impressions, takes from your time here at the Kaseya Center? Is that how you pronounce it?
Kaseya. My first thoughts about it are that we shouldn't bury the lead. You had 2 30-point triple-doubles in this game for the Denver Nuggets. Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. The two-man game strikes back after they were kind of quieted down in Game 2, or Jamal Murray at least quieted down, and Jokic's playmaking, not able to generate a ton of assists in Game 2 based on the way that his teammates were shooting, and also just based on the way that Miami was defending. But 32 points, 21 rebounds, 10 assists for Jokic. The first 30-20-10 game in NBA Finals history seems pretty good. And Murray, 34 points to lead the way, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, 7 turnovers for Murray. But given everything he was providing with getting to the rim, getting to the line, getting his step back, getting everybody else involved, it would, you'll take those sins of commission 10 times out of 10 given the other production, and also there's the major bounce back. Michael Malone talked after the game about the 48 hours preceding this one, where he knew that Murray was taking it really hard, felt like he was the one who was sort of responsible for that Game 2 loss. And he was fine in Game 2, 18 points, 10 assists. He's actually had 10 assists in all 3 of these games, which is kind of a wild stat. You don't think of him as the primary facilitator, but double doubles in all these games. He felt that it wasn't that he played poorly. It just he felt like he could have done more. He didn't do enough because they fell short by 3 points. That shot at the buzzer didn't go down, and he was determined to not let that happen again. Aggressive from the opening tip, constantly looking to press the action, and he needed to be. Michael Porter Jr. continues to struggle from the field. Aaron Gordon's not going to give you major volume scoring. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, foul trouble early, only wound up taking 4 shots. They needed those points to come from somewhere. They needed that activity to come from somewhere. And Murray and Jokic again and again, that dance we've seen for 7 years, that partnership that's produced so many points, so many big wins, so many big moments for them. It was, by the estimation of Malone, Jokic and Murray themselves were kind of like, I don't know about, it's not for us to say, but in the estimation of Malone, literally the best performance they've ever put on together on the biggest stage. So, and because of it, they swipe home court right back. It's now, and they're looking to get greedy. They're saying, let's get 2 here in South Beach and then go back home to close out, which is a dramatic reversal of fortune from where this thing was coming out of game 2.
That's how it feels, right? Like the last couple of days, and when Vinny Goodwill and I were recording late Sunday night, it was, oh, okay, this is a series now, heading back to Miami. We're going to have all those shooters who put up a historic performance in game 2. Now they're back at their home floor where complementary players, especially, long distance marksmen, typically shoot better, perform better at home. But Miami's now lost 3 straight at home. They were pretty dreadful at home against Boston. To go back to the Murray Jokic brilliance, how good are they? They're the first pair of teammates, according to our rundown put together by producer John Gennaro. The first pair of teammates with a triple-double in the same NBA Finals game ever. The first pair of teammates with 25 plus points and 10 assists in the same Finals game ever. In a playoffs where, to me, one of the overall themes that we talked about previously when you did not respond to my text on Mother's Day was that these teams having their kind of go-to 2-man lineups, which are their two 1A, 1B actions where, honestly, this is another element of the conversation where the league is trending in the new CBA rules where teams are going to basically get punished for staffing up with 3 supermax contracts. Like, we're kind of already been there in these playoffs where there's been, the Nuggets had to go through LeBron and AD most previously. They went against KD and Booker. You had the Cat, Anthony Edwards, Philly with Embiid and Harden, Jimmy Butler, Bam, and they don't really run a typical like pick and roll situation that Jokic and Murray do. But same thing with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, like that 1-2 punch. There just hasn't seemed like another 1-2 punch of any contender that is in as much symbiosis and gets to their shots easier than these 2 guys together. There's so much more at play here. There's massive coaching staffs and there are 8-9 man rotations, but maybe this thing just gets boiled down to that where, Jokic is showing up every single night, whether his shot's not falling, whether he's not exactly, picking apart a defense like a quarterback and feeding 11 different receivers. Like, he's providing some type of, unstoppable force on offense every single night. Murray has not, been putting up 30 points every single game, but that 10 assist number you're mentioning, he's bringing something every single night. They had that bread and butter 2-man game, whether it's at the top of the key, on the wings. Like, these guys, you said it, 7 years. They know how to play off each other. It seems like better than any other all-star caliber tandem. Like, you could say the Duncan Bam DHO has had its like moments, and that synergy they have is something special. But Murray and Jokic just seems like a different breed right now.
Absolutely. And it's some of it is the comfort level that they've got with each other, just the ability to read and react and flow into different actions. They've seen every kind of coverage you can throw at them. Miami tonight tried to do a little bit more blitzing of Jamal, a little bit more, which is kind of was counterintuitive, right? You wouldn't think put 2 on the ball on Murray, give Jokic a 4-on-3. Like that's death on the other end of that. But they were trying to disrupt Murray's rhythm. He forced them into that kind of adjustment with the way he was playing, the activity that he had. And the shot making. And Malone talked about it after the game. And, again, Jokic and Murray are a little bit, they're a little bit squishy when it comes to like verbalizing their chemistry and their, they will acknowledge that they fit perfectly together and they work well together, but they're not going to like wax rhapsodic about it. Michael Malone will wax rhapsodic if you give him the opportunity to, about pretty much everything. I'm learning that as these playoffs go along. But
very good press conference performer, Michael Malone.
He is. But one of the things that I love that he said tonight, this is probably going to make its way into the story as I write it later, is that, quote, a lot of guys play with each other. I think those two guys play for each other and off each other, and they read each other so well. And he just sort of looks at that. It's not just they're efficient. They can each, the things that Spoelstra is talking about are a little bit less squishy and ooey and gooey. He's like, they can all score. They can both score at all three levels. They can both get to the rim. They can get to the line. They can pull up from three. They've both had 50-point playoff games in their history. They've both had multiple double-digit assist playoff games in their history. Like, they stress you out in so many ways, and they can distort your coverages in so many ways. And you saw like the absolute best version of that tonight. At a time where they desperately needed it to be able to get back on top in this series, because the Nuggets have not trailed in a series in this postseason. And that was in jeopardy tonight at the absolute worst time. And when their best was required and needed, they got it. And they got it in spades tonight.
To go with another more like, you're right, what you see, as opposed to digging into the numbers, Murray clearly came out with a mentality to attack and a mentality to step on whatever was in front of him. And you can see it when he pounds the rock. Like, you can just tell that he's on a different, like, F you, I'm coming at you mode. And I was going back through, I shamelessly read one of my articles about Denver from March, back when they came to New York.
How dare you read a story you wrote? That's what a narcissistic cheater you are.
I was curious going back. Because they had that stretch where they came to New York, and it was in late March, where they had lost like 4 or 5. And Calvin Booth even like admitted that he felt the team just let their foot off the gas and was coasting to the finish line. They were up like 9 games on first place at that point in time. They had this weird back-to-back in New York where they had matinee games, like 1 o'clock and 3:30 on Saturday and Sunday. First at MSG, and then second at Barclays Center. And the Knicks beat Denver. Julius Randle had a 50-point game. It was like a pretty bored locker room, honestly, in above Penn Station there. And then the next game at Brooklyn, like, Murray came out and he had just a game where he's like, I'm going to exert my will on this, proceeding in front of me. I'm going to be the most dynamic player out here, even if Nikola Jokic is my teammate. Like, that's the kind of mentality he can bring at any moment. And that's a real valuable asset and a skill and a confidence that, to me, and from conversations I've had with the people who know how this stuff works, like, can separate the goods from the greats and like the all-time greats from the greats. And I'm not sitting here saying that Jamal Murray is an all-time great right now, but
that was an all-time great.
That was an all-time. Yeah, it was. And like, look, they're 2 games away from their first finals. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because the Phoenix Suns, who we'll talk about after our ad break, they were up 2-0 on Milwaukee, and look what happened. These Miami Heat were up 2 games on the Dallas Mavericks, many, many years ago, before Dallas rattled off those 4 straight wins. So this lead is not, but like, right now, if you just looked at Denver and didn't watch game 2, you would be thinking this is a dynasty in the making with 2 superstars in their primes. So Murray is just, I feel like his performance can get overshadowed by what Jokic did. And I just wanted to take another second to be like, this guy really can also be the straw that stirs the string.
Yeah, and to put a button on that, I went back and I wasn't cheating by looking at my old stories, but I was looking at old box scores and game logs, and looking at like the rare down games that Murray has had in this run for Denver. 19 points on 8 for 21 shooting in Game 4 against the Timberwolves, which was Denver's lone loss in that series. What does he do in Game 5? Game high 35 to close out Minnesota. 10 points on 3 for 15 shooting in Game 2 against the Suns. Actually, a game that Denver won, but his worst performance individually of the postseason. Next 4 games, 26.3 points on 47, 40, 90 shooting as they close out in 6. Did not have a single bad game against the Lakers, and as a result, they get swept. And Murray, after tonight's game, said, if I can pull up the quote here, he said, most people that have watched the Nuggets play know that when I have a game like that, I'm most likely going to bounce back. It was just one of those days. And that's, the numbers bear that out, and the performance tonight certainly bore that out. This is a guy who's, ready for the moment and ready to sort of step up to it, and he absolutely knocked it out tonight.
That's one of his things. He's not surly, but he kind of likes to play that, like, if you're familiar with my work, he does it all the time.
This series is like the chip on my shoulder aggrieved Super Bowl, aggrieved finals, championship round of it, because Spoelstra throughout almost all of his pressers is like, for the national people who haven't been following us along the way, and Michael Malone continually being like, no one's talking about us. All these other topics of conversation. It's almost like we're not even here. The Lakers, the Lakers, and here we are. Everybody's got their fight that they've manufactured, and I'm not saying that it's all invented out of thin air, but I am saying at this point, I think we're doing a fair amount of talking about a team that's 2 wins away from an NBA championship.
The aggrieved parties eras tour, one could say, also being that. I'm now interchanging Eras Tour and Super Bowl based off of the conversation and discourse that's happening in my household. So I feel like that's probably becoming a mainstream synonym for any type of high-level opportunity, big stage, enormous amount of eyeballs on top performers and pressure, packing a sold-out stadium. So there you go. Any other thoughts on this game? Do you want to touch on Miami? Do you want to touch on things they can change? I mean, I do think we need to give another shout out on the Denver side of things to Christian Braun, who
absolutely.
He was great in the first half too. A ton of really sneaky cuts down the baseline as Miami goes to that zone with Duncan Robinson, and then just pops off in the third quarter, a drive and dish to Nikola Jokic. He had that great steal with a transition finish in the first half, but then the second half, after that layup and one finish over Gabe Vincent, he gets out on the break and just barrels through Jimmy Butler at the rim, like stuff that rookies just don't do. He is 22. He is, definitely physically mature enough for this stage. The guy looks like a linebacker out there. And Denver's been super high on this kid since well before the draft. Like, the Nuggets personnel, from what I know, were kind of patting themselves on the back and, pretty celebratory after that selection in the first round. So they're not surprised by his performance here. And one thing I saw back in that story of mine from March was that was kind of in the beginnings of when Denver was trying out that Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, plus Bruce Brown, Christian Braun, Jeff Green bench lineup. Mm-hmm. And tonight, if you want to get a little chess match X's and O's with adjustments and stuff, like, Jokic was basically out there the entire night. And he took Jeff Green's place in that lineup. He took Aaron Gordon's place in that lineup. But Christian Braun was the most constant effort and just overall force outside of that two-man game. So shout out to a 22-year-old rookie out of Kansas.
And to your point there, Jokic asked after the game, you guys, all the veterans in the past, they keep calling him Christian Braun a winner. He's just a winner. When you see him play like he did tonight, what did you think about it? What did you say to him after the game? And Jokic's quote is, I told him, you won us this game. He's a winner, and he won us the game with energy, the focus, the mindset. Like, they, to a man, throughout this series, throughout every press availability, everything, and as you said, going back even into the season, they do not view him as a rookie. They do not view him as somebody who's like, even, is just going to make mistakes and you've got to make up for him. Even when he makes mistakes, he's going to make up for them himself with his effort, with his energy, his willingness to defend, the mentality. And all of that was on display, on a night where those other guys, as we mentioned earlier, not great shooting from most other aspects of the Nuggets roster, not a whole lot of offensive juice and creation from some of those other guys. They needed something somewhere, and him on those cuts in transition, again, taking the challenge on Jimmy, but also shutting down Duncan Robinson, making sure he's not getting clean catches, all those sorts of things. He's checking every box, and, the way he responded to it was like, those guys make my job easy. Like, they put me in positions, they set me, basically spoon feed me easy looks. All I got to do is make them, and all I got to do is defend with energy. But that's a pretty big skill. That's not an easy thing to do. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And to do it in your first postseason run, in your first finals, when they needed it because Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. is losing minutes to Christian Braun because Christian Braun is ready for this opportunity. And Michael Porter Jr. just hasn't been able to, played hard, played aggressive, was active, but the shot's not going down. And sometimes that affects the rest of his game. It's not affecting Christian Braun's game. Christian Braun is going to bring that level of intensity and offensive effort or defensive effort no matter what. And then tonight the shots go down too. It all kind of dovetails together. The biggest thing for Miami, if you want to switch to them just for a little bit here, the top line is the one game Miami has won in this series so far is the one where they went bananas from 3-point range, shot 48.6% from three, made, I think it was 17 threes. The first game 1, game 3, they don't get that many. They don't get as many threes off. They don't make as many of them, and they get. It doesn't end in a blowout, but it's not far off. And they were down by 20 plus in the third quarter of both those games. So what you see is Denver's size manifesting on the defensive end. Miami shot, I believe, about 40% from 2-point range. Yeah, 23 of 57 inside the arc, 40.4%. And if you're not able to if the Heat are not able to balance that out with high volume 3-point shooting, highly accurate 3-point shooting, and those advantages on the free throw line in transition, not turning the ball over. If they're not winning all of those other possession battles and getting the high volume threes, it's a really tall hill to climb for them against a team that's just going to be able to get such efficient shots almost every time down the floor because they know what they're going to be able to put Murray and Jokic into action and get something good out of it. Whether you blitz it or you drop or you hedge or you switch or whatever, you're getting something good out of it. And they continually did that tonight. And it put Miami just behind the 8 ball all night long.
A fun fact here about the Heat. Even in defeat, even in agony, even with those culture shirts being shoved down their throats.
Towels. I just want to clarify for the record. Accuracy in reporting, microphone at a table. Doing great.
That's what's important here.
Yeah.
Udonis Haslem became the oldest player to appear in an NBA Finals game at 42 years old. To a crowd that was already depleted and heading for the exits, which it's so funny to me when they recalled on the broadcast how fans left early at Game 6 of the 2013 finals.
Yeah, the Ray Allen game.
I always confuse 13 and 14, which year is which. Which, this is Game 3, and this was nothing nearly close to that. So just a hyperbolic comparison. But speaking of old Miami men, I just want to get a quick hot take out there.
Let's hear it.
So Kevin Love.
So actually, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Before you start, that's not what they're called. They're not called hot takes.
I was waiting for you to correct me.
Yeah, no. We need to fix that. Can we fix that? Maybe we can do it in post, but I would much prefer it if we did it right now.
Yeah, it's a hot take.
That's exactly what it is. Thank you so much.
It's quick, but it's something I really believe in. You're too old to be taking charges at 34, Kevin Love. I took my last charge at 26. And when it happened, it was in a rec league game, not an NBA Finals matchup. But it felt like I got hit by a goddamn car. And I felt the aftershock in my neck, the back of my neck, the front of my entire neck for at least a week and a half afterwards. I was okay. I was moving around. But to see gray-haired Kevin Love hit the deck like that, it was effective. He drew a charge. I think it was in the first quarter. I don't remember exactly what it was.
It was early, yeah.
It was definitely in the first half. It's just kind of insane to me because Kyle Lowry does it all the time. But Kyle Lowry's a small, not really chisel, but he's got way more muscle than Kevin Love. I feel like he can roll around and take the hit way more effectively.
We don't. Let's not body shame Kevin Love. Kevin Love
was in body shaming.
He was in the body issue. He's chiseled and ripped. He completely transformed his body from the early days in Minnesota. Come on now.
It hurt me to watch Kevin Love take a charge tonight.
I hear that. I do hear that. As somebody who has been nursing a sore arm today from sleeping, which was, here's your future, Jake. You're going to turn 40 and everything's going to start falling apart on you as you travel around this globe of ours. But I guess I would say to you, I hear you. I hear your take. I hear your Jake. I hear your point. But Kevin Love this is how Kevin Love can play defense now, right? This is
True.
like he's not gonna. I mean, which actually, to his credit, he was really good in game 2 as a help defender and a rover and getting hands in passing lanes, all that kind of stuff, timely help. But for the most part, the guy's driving into the lane. Kevin Love's not getting up off the floor to block you at the rim and meet you at the summit. He's planting his feet and just taking a shot right in the chops and then going down and hoping that it goes the other way. And he's handsomely compensated for it, Jake. He'd have him on a $3.1 million 1-year deal. And if that's the going rate for taking a charge on like a giant NBA athlete, I mean, the risk reward is pretty good. It's not nice work if you can get it, but at least it's well compensated work if you can get it.
I would take one charge from an NBA athlete for $3.1 million, but Kevin Love's taken like probably I don't know the numbers, but definitely over a dozen charges in his time since he was bought out. I'm gonna guess over 2 dozen, and you never know You never know when the next charge you take is going to be your last. That's all I'm saying.
Well, listen,
and I'm worried it could happen on national TV.
But listen, Kevin Love has tasted tasted the NBA title. He's gotten to the peak. He's this close again. If it's going to be the last one, and if the last one gets you that much closer to a title, that's what better way than to die historic on the Fury Road, right? That's the way he's going to go out. So, what would be a glorious day if that happens. But tonight, not so much glory for Kevin Love and the Miami Heat.
With that, we will dissolve into our first break here. We'll come back with some news on Chris Paul and potentially talk about the chaos that's happening in Dallas. That's not really chaos, but was made to seem like chaos on Monday afternoon. Okay, welcome back. No Cap Room, Jake Fisher, Dan Devine. We're going to get to some news, some rumblings. I put out a notebook on Tuesday at Yahoo with some early draft chatter and whatnot. And the word around the league, I can tell you from talking to like 36 people on Monday and Tuesday, was that it's so quiet. There's like nothing going on. Turns out Wednesday, the Phoenix Suns decided to contact Chris Paul's representation at CAA Sports. And from my read on it, this has been trending towards since I remember talking on the phone to an agent looking at Talking Stick Arena as I was walking towards Game 6 and getting prepared to write like a postmortem on Phoenix and what could happen this offseason.
For those who aren't like huge arena name heads, that's where the Suns play basketball.
That's where the Suns play basketball. And I mean, the options for what Phoenix can do with Chris Paul are straightforward. They can either waive him, being that he has only 15.8 of his $30+ million guaranteed for next season. They can try to trade him. And that's really it, because no one, I think, in Phoenix was prepared to pay Chris Paul $30 million next season after the year that he had. That's just kind of the brass tacks of it all. So what happened Wednesday appears to be a formal communication of such to Chris Paul's people, and that there's going to need to be some workings around here of what happens. If Chris Paul gets waived and stretched, they stretch out his salary over the next couple of seasons, they will not be able to retain him. So that's a big difference here. I don't want to get too nitty gritty into the cap minutia because I don't have it fully brushed up and in front of me, but that is kind of all we need to know for the intents and purposes of this conversation right now. So could we see them waive Chris Paul and bring him back at a minimum? Yeah, but that goes off the table immediately.
Probably not a minimum. But a lower number maybe, but a minimum would be an awfully big haircut for the guy who used to run the union.
Would be, but then you add that $15 million, he's making 17. That's not exactly
yeah.
I'm just saying if that's one plausible scenario.
Possibility, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
to give Phoenix, because I was heading towards, but to give Phoenix far more financial wiggle room than they've got right now, being that they have 3 massive contracts already on their books, not counting Chris Paul's, and Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton. Plus, they gave all their draft capital away to Brooklyn to acquire Kevin Durant. Plus, Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. They've got Landry Shamitz's deal and whatever, and they don't have a ton left. So, all that is to say, buckle up for what's happening in Phoenix, because I don't want to give a lot more granular detail right now because I'm trying to do an article for Yahoo Sports on Friday. I don't want to give up too much. But first, before we'll provide some further context, but just after that expository, Dan, how many point guards are actually available right now? Because this is the question. This is the question I was left with after one phone call I made tonight once the news broke about this development in Phoenix. Who can you really get based off of, if they get the non-taxpayer mid-level available with stretching him, it's about, $12 million, or waiving him, excuse me. Who can you really get out there at that salary figure that's going to really raise the ceiling that much higher for Phoenix? Where I just don't know how much upside there is going to be outside of bringing back Chris Paul at a lower salary figure for these Suns.
Yeah, the top of the free agent point guard market is Kyrie Irving and Fred VanVleet, and they're going to come in well above that number. D'Angelo Russell probably also going to come in well above that number. And then you're talking about, Gabe Vincent in line for a nice raise off of what he's making in Miami. But is Gabe Vincent changing your life if he's coming in as your starting point guard for the Phoenix Suns? Probably not.
Hey, he's the starting point guard on an NBA Finals team right now,
and has been sensational in the role and shown himself capable of sort of filling in multiple slots. He can be your low usage 3-and-D kind of guard, or he can be a really sort of positive pick and roll player who can take on more of a shooting role, as he's done since Tyler Hero's injury, all that kind of stuff. But I would be surprised if they looked at that and said, well, we think that's a more palatable answer for us than Chris Paul at a lower number. So, and as you said, making trades when you don't have a whole lot of assets to be able to do it, to bring in somebody in that same sort of salary range or commensurate with that to fill that role becomes much more tricky. So yeah, to me that pathway for Phoenix makes sense. The thing I wonder though is as we get to, because I believe his guarantee date is June 28th. We're about a little under 3 weeks away.
The day before free agency starts. So
yeah,
clearly there needs to be some quick movement here, at least on the decision to waive him or not, because the clock is ticking and Chris Paul's got to know whether he's going to be a free agent or not. Mm-hmm. And that will be a massive domino that a lot of teams will want to know about. And I think Phoenix will probably be trying to look at deals that include both him and DeAndre Ayton outgoing. That's that's a giant salary figure going out, but DeAndre Ayton in theory is the Suns' best trade chip right now. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to figure out trade opportunities to improve at the point guard position, that's good. It's just by default, it's going to be a thing that happens.
Yeah, and from Paul's individual perspective, it's worth contextualizing the last couple of moves he's made. He's basically called his shot on the last 2 moves he's made, right? From basically since he was with the Clippers, when that ran its course, and he said where I'm going to go is to Houston, and so here's how we're going to figure out how we make it work.
He didn't call a shot to OKC. That was
fair point.
Yeah, that was a tough one for good old CP3.
So 2 of the last 3. All right, he had his sabbatical year, his interregnum in OKC, but then it was who do I want to link up with? Where do I want to go after that? And it was to get to Phoenix, and then we figure out how to go from there. So, and especially at this stage of his career, Chris Paul he's not going to leave that up to chance. He's going to want to know as early as possible and in as much certainty as possible what is available to him, what the options are, what the plans of the front office are of a new regime, so that he can find the softest and safest landing spot for him. And that's why, I think that's why 3 weeks out from the guarantee date, you see the push on these stories, because it's maybe let's get this moving. And from the Suns' perspective too, they have to have a plan of attack going in, to free agency and into the draft and everything else to try to figure out what their best way to, reinforce that roster is. I think Paul operates or sort of occupies a really interesting place right now, because I think many people, reasonable people, would look at it and say, how could you possibly re-up him on a longer run and believe and feel confident that he's not going to get hurt again, that he's going to be available again, that he's not going to have his regular season performance has downturned for the last several years, and then he's also hurt and not available in the playoffs. And so at what point does having him around not become beneficial for your long-term goals of trying to win a championship? But he's also too good to just say, we'll get somebody else in to do the same thing for less money. It's not, he's in that middle kind of ground where he's not an all-star anymore, but he's too good to just say, forget it, we'll find somebody else to fill it to 85% of the production for half the money. And so that's why moving on from him becomes so tricky before you even get into the personal politics of all of it and how you treat these superstar players on their way out. It's a lot of moving pieces to move around the board in Phoenix. But the good news is Michael Malone he was happy enough with the win that he didn't get mad that the Nuggets were once again not the big topic of conversation on a night where they were in the freaking NBA Finals. So
you threw out Kyrie earlier.
I did mention his name. His name has been coming up recently.
It has. After he went on Instagram Live and professed that his name has been dragged through the mud, and that...
Let's not talk about... Guys, Kyrie just doesn't want us to talk about him, all right? Kyrie would love it. Would love nothing more than for us to not talk about him. So I don't understand why all these rumors are going around and why we're all doing all this talking about him.
Yeah. Well, on Monday, before all the Chris Paul news happened, we had reports from The Athletic and Bleacher Report about how Kyrie is actively recruiting LeBron to come to Dallas, even though there is very little chances of a trade between the Lakers and the Mavericks occurring, being that the Mavericks, like the Phoenix Suns, have next to zero assets to send out in exchange for arguably the greatest player of all time, who is about to start the first of a 2-year, basically $100 million contract with the Lakers, where they play in the city of Los Angeles next to or nearby USC, where LeBron's son will be playing next year. And the Mavericks have no real other opportunities or mechanisms of adding him other than him asking for a buyout and reaching the open market, which doesn't seem likely either. So that's the prelude to saying, these situations between Kyrie and Dallas and Chris Paul and Phoenix, they're just going to inevitably get kind of snowballed into each other, some type of Venn diagram of rumors where only one of these guys in theory could end up playing with LeBron. I don't believe Kyrie has any chance of getting to LA unless he wants to take some major financial losses. Chris Paul seems like might be forced and backed into a corner in doing so. You talked about, you kind of raised a brow and pushed back on him taking the minimum if he got bought out from Phoenix. Again, I don't know. I haven't talked to CP's people yet about it.
In fairness, I totally forgot about the part where he would actually get the $15 million, so that it would wind up being a 17 or $18 million sort of net, and that makes a lot more sense.
And that type of stuff has factored into John Wall's buyout with Houston, and then he got the mid-level with the Clippers, and you looked at it as when he factored together, he actually made $12 million. Danilo Gallinari with Boston, when he got traded to San Antonio as part of the DeJounte Murray trade, a lot of his salary got guaranteed there. Then he got waived. Then he signed for the mid-level in Boston, which his salary figure on the books is only $8 million this season, whatever it was, something like that, $8 to $10 million. But he also banked another, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he kind of doubled his salary basically for being the salary filler for DeJounte Murray. So I think savvy players and someone who, to your point, was the president of the union will see what their final bank total is, as opposed to just, their figure on a team's cap books. But that's to say, like, depending on what happens, it is far more likely and far more realistic and like damn near like super plausible for Chris Paul to be the point guard of the Los Angeles Lakers next year. Same thing with the Clippers, where the Clippers were far more active in like really trying to find point guard help at the trade deadline. They end up with Bones Highland, who they definitely like in LA to have another young piece after sending out Keon Johnson in that Portland deal from Norm Powell. And Jason Preston has been, pretty stalled in his young career with injuries. Brandon Boston is not exactly the contributor that some people hope he could be at this point, but he had an incredible G League showcase, I remember. So just getting another young player like Highland in there was good for them. But I think, it's been shown, especially as Kawhi and Paul George continue to trade being sidelined with injuries, that like the Clippers can really benefit from an added ball handler if their like two-headed wing creation monster is not two-headed and maybe even zero-headed at times. So, I mean, and obviously CP played there and his family's still based there. So, like, I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves here. That's just something that I would absolutely keep in mind. Like, I don't know what the likelihood of Phoenix wanting to go after Kyrie, the other end of this triangle, if it's like Kyrie, Chris Paul, LA, Phoenix, Dallas, LeBron. Like, the other aspect of this is, we talked about sign and trades. Is there a sign and trade with D'Angelo Russell for Phoenix that makes sense? I mean, I wrote this back before the deadline. Like, he was definitely someone that was on their radar, and they had conversations with Minnesota. I'm going to try to be able to get my intel to write a little bit more in detail about those talks later in the week. Is there a sign and trade with Kyrie Irving that makes sense? Like, I don't know. Is there a bigger thing with Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton with Kyrie going back and other pieces? Like, these things are all going to be talked about and looked at, though, for sure. I can guarantee you. So that triangle, that kind of Spider-Man meme, that The Office meme where Phoenix, Dallas, LA, LeBron, Kyrie, Chris Paul. This offseason is going to be buzzing with that at the top, no matter what. Then the trickle down will go from there. Chris Paul could be a very feasible backup option for Houston if they don't get James Harden. Like, it's going to be kind of a little incestual rumor mill with all the old partners kind of maybe flirting with dancing back down the aisle together.
Well, I have two main thoughts. One, or I guess, I don't know. We'll see how many they wind up being. We'll kind of bullet point them. One, I just double checked. You said there's really no mechanism for LeBron to get to Dallas, but I just put it in the trade machine and him for Luka works. So like, that's one way, maybe we just go straight up, Luka for LeBron, take that L on the way out the door, bring it with you to Dallas, could work out really swimmingly for both sides. So that's one. Two, you mentioned Chris Paul potentially being the sort of answer for the Clippers, a Clippers team that has needed, been looking for point guard help for years, and especially has been, it is a sort of a dire situation where injuries are a real concern for them.
Yes.
I can see no possible downside to relying on Chris Paul to be the answer for your injury woes.
Fair.
And then the third thing is just, okay, so yeah, maybe Chris Paul winds up, it's whatever, however many years after the basketball reasons termination of the Chris Paul to the Lakers trade, maybe that circle finally gets squared, it's completed, and we come all the way around. Maybe that would allow them to get one game next year off the Denver Nuggets, who swept the Lakers and are in the NBA Finals, and won an NBA Finals game tonight. So as we look forward to transaction palooza and the acquisitive frenzy of free agency, let's remember that it's all in the service of trying to win this thing that's happening here, that I'm traipsing around the country trying to keep an eye on, and that anybody who's building a team in the West needs to be thinking about how they do it to deal with what I just watched, because what I just watched is a dangerous, dangerous thing.
There you go. That is going to do it for us tonight on this episode of No Cap Room. Thank you, as always, to John Gennaro for doing all the things he does to make this show look and sound great. Thanks to Brett Rader. Thanks to Evan Doherty. Thanks to Ron Schultz. Thanks to everybody on the Yahoo Sports team that touches this product before it comes to the eyes and ear holes of all of our listeners. Follow us on Twitter at Jake L. Fisher, at Your Man Divine. Please subscribe to Ball Don't Lie on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you are currently listening on, and leave us a 5-star review. That would be great. Vinny Goodwill will be back after Game 4 on Friday with, it says one of us, but definitely not me, because I will be at one of 17,000 engagement party, wedding, rehearsal dinner, bachelor party things I had this year. It'll be Dan. So thank you for listening to this episode. Please tune in on Friday. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. And we'd appreciate it if you came back next week for another episode of a standard Jake and Dan episode of No Cap Room.